Everybody, welcome to the Basics of Cannabis Growing. I am Paul Anthony Edwards from HumbleFlowerFarms, and today's webinar is going to be about growing cannabis. If you are a beginner or you are just starting out growing cannabis, this presentation is going to break down some of the meanings and some of the main requirements that you're going to need to grow cannabis well. So a quick disclaimer, this presentation is for those who are able to grow cannabis legally. What you do with the information is on you. So this week we're going to be covering the cannabis plant, some of the anatomy behind it, the necessary requirements for growing the plant, and the basics to fertilizers. So the cannabis plant has three main varieties that you'll see in circulation now: Cannabis indica, sativa, and ruderalis. When you go into a dispensary, you'll often hear indica and sativa being thrown around, talking about the way that the plant makes you feel, but it actually is scientifically used to talk about the way that the plant grows. Because you can see here, there's an obvious difference in these two plants. So cannabis sativa will grow a lot taller, a lot faster, while indica likes to stay short and stubby. And that's just because they grew in different regions. Cannabis sativa grows in a lot hotter environments. Indicas are grown in more mountains, higher altitude, colder regions. Ruderalis is fairly new on the scene. It's also known as autoflowers. This is a very different species of cannabis, and it is something that is not photoperiod. So we'll go over what that means later. And when you're buying flower from a cannabis ruderalis plant, remember when you're in the dispensary, they will talk about indicas and sativas for the way it feels, but it is in fact a ruderalis plant. So when you start your plant, you're either going to be starting it from seed or you're going to be starting it from clone. From seeds is a very good option if you're trying to keep your grow space sanitary. These will just pop in the ground. You do have a 50-50 chance with regular seeds of they being a male plant or a female plant. So you have to take those male plants out of the room if you do get one. And if you get a variety of seeds called feminized seeds, they have much higher chances of being a female plant. All the genetics made in that seed come from females. So it's much better chances of it ending out female. Not saying that they can't be males because it happens from time to time. It's just more likely that it's going to be a female. Another option is a clone. So this is a cutting off of a mother plant that's been stuck in a water solution, and the roots can grow out of the stem of that plant and actually create a brand new plant that is a direct copy of the plant that it came from. So you already know how much potency it can reach, the size it can reach, how fast it's going to grow. You know about that plant a little more. You'll find these in your dispensaries. And the caveat with this is some dispensaries don't do a great job in keeping their areas where they're keeping their clones sanitary and clean. So depending on who's walking in, if you have someone that just had a fungus gnat outbreak or a mold outbreak in their mildew outbreak in their grow, you might have some spores that fall on those plants if they came 5 minutes before you. So you're rolling the dice a little bit. It's a good idea to quarantine those plants to see if they show any symptoms before adding them to the room with the rest of your plants. Real quick, we'll go over the male and female parts of the plant. So a male plant is not going to have any smokable flower on it. These are all pollen sacs that are used to fertilize the female plant. And if you get one of these male plants, it's really no use to you unless you're a breeder and you're looking to do some genetic crossing, which if you're watching this presentation, you probably aren't at this time. A female plant, though, will have all of the flower that we smoke. Now, a female plant can produce seeds. That's called a hermaphroditic plant, and that can be anything from, your genetics weren't that great, you had some light leaks in your grow room or your grow area, or they just were really stressed out during their life cycle. So that's how a female plant can actually grow seeds. But the male plant is primarily the one that we will get seeds from. And again, if you're just growing cannabis and you're for your own personal consumption, you want to take those plants out of your grow space. So once you have your selected starter plant, be it a seed or a clone, you're going to need these four major concepts in order to grow that plant successfully. You're going to need a good medium, water requirements, certain light requirements, and environmental requirements. So when talking about mediums, first thing we think about is soil, but there's actually different ways to grow it. It's soil and there's hydroponic growing. Soil is any medium that is made from organic material. You'll see rocks and shell and forest materials and things of that nature in your soil mixes. There are organic soils, which only have ingredients found in nature in them. And there's also charged soils, which have chemical fertilizers added to them. Chemical fertilizers aren't always bad. It really depends on what that product has in it. There's different ways to get nitrogen into your soil. You want to do it the cleanest way for your plant because you're going to be consuming this plant. There's also soilless mixes, and this is usually made out of peat moss mixed with perlite, and it's really soft and fluffy, but you might want to add more fertilizer to that because peat moss isn't that nutritionally dense. Some good things about soils, though, is that for the most time they do have all of the nutrients that you'll need for a good majority of the life cycle of that plant. When talking about readily available, it means the roots can dig out into the pot and expand and grow. And as you water it, it is taking up nutrients just from the dirt itself. Something about soils, though, is they may have contaminants in them, bugs, different seeds from different plants, or pathogen like powdery mildew or something can be living, or fungal can be living in your soil. So that's important to know while you're shopping. If you bust open a bag and it doesn't seem right, you might want to return that bag. In hydroponics, though, it's anything that's growing that's not in soil. Rock, sand, non-soil mediums, water itself. Cocoa is a big one in this industry. It is something that looks a lot like soil, but is actually made from coconut husks, finely ground up, usually mixed with perlite, which is a volcanic rock that's good to add oxygen to your roots. Deep water culture is when your plants are completely submerged in water for their entire life cycle. And the way they get oxygen is air is fed underneath them, straight up into the root system. Ebb and flow is an example that's being used here, where the water will rise up to the top of the root zone, and that plant will be able to take in all those nutrients and all that water, and then it sinks back down and does this a few times a day so that it can both be oxygenated and full of nutrients. And the last one is aquaponics. This is using fish to feed your garden. So you'll be growing a common strain is tilapia next to your plants, and you're going to use their waste material to actually enrich those plants. Something about that, though, is you can't add any chemicals to that one because that a fish can't ingest. You are using the same water for both, and it gets recirculated most of the time. So you want to make sure that you're keeping your fish healthy along with your plants. A good and bad thing about this is that it is inert, which means that there are no nutrients inside of it. It's not charged, it's not hot, and it is going to rely on you to give the plant all of the nutrients that it needs on a daily basis. And so you get to choose exactly what your plant is eating that day, and it's really good in controlling the nutrients that your plants are uptaking. But if you mess up, it's on you. So moving on to water, the main thing I want to cover is pH. This is a scale to see how acidic the water that you're using is. Plants have special requirements, and you can't grow all the same plants with different pH, with the same pH levels. They require different things. So cannabis likes it slightly acidic. Anywhere between 5.5 and 6.5 is a good zone to keep your cannabis plant in. Safe spot is around 6.0, 6.1, 6.2 is fine. And this is a range where your plants are going to be able to uptake most of their nutrients. Your plants shouldn't have many health problems with this. And if they do, you are adding, fertilizers and solutions to your mix anyway, and you can bounce back plants fairly quickly if your pH is in check. Why it's important is because most nutrient issues are related to pH imbalance. This means that your pH is a little low and it's uptaking more of one nutrient than the other. So you'll have a deficiency and a toxicity a lot of the time. That's why it's especially hard to diagnose plant problems when you have a pH issue. Because it'll be showing signs of both things most of the time. So you have to kind of figure out what went wrong there. And a good way to test your pH is to, do a classic litmus test, test the soil and test the water that is running off of your plants, and also test the pH of the water that is being fed to the plants. An electronic meter is not hard to find for fairly cheap these days. You just have to remember you should calibrate them often to keep them on point. Moving on to light. Cannabis plants require light cycles in order to differentiate them from a vegetative state to a flowering state. Photoperiod plants are what they're called, except for Cannabis ruderalis, which is on its own schedule. This means no matter what your plants are under in terms of how long the light is staying on, they are going to flower on their own time. Whereas your normal Cannabis indicas and Cannabis sativas, those require you to flip the lights to a different light cycle. So in a vegetative state, we want to keep them on for at least 18 hours a day. You can do anywhere from 18 to 24 hours. It is a good idea, though, to let your plants rest and open up to release more humidity during the night. You don't want to keep them under blast all the time. And in your flowering stage, it's going to be 12 hours of light a day and then 12 hours of darkness. And it's very important to keep your plants in complete and total darkness while they're resting. Otherwise, you might have light leaks, which will stress out the plant, and you can get seeds in your bud that way. And remember, anytime that they're making a seed, they're taking away from the plant's final potency. So in an indoor versus outdoor setting, you are completely at the mercy of nature. So in the springtime, there's a lot longer days. And as it moves on, it's going to get a lot less light during the days. And when it does so, most trees will lose their leaves and start dropping nuts. And then cannabis is the same way. It's going to start flowering out, producing seeds. And when the cannabis plant dies in nature, those seeds go into the earth, hopefully survive the winter, and then spring up again. And so they're going to spend most of their time in veg, just working to get bigger, taking up as much room as possible. And once they flip into flower, they're going to stop growing as big, but they are going to start producing a lot more dense vegetation around the ends of the stick, or the ends of the stems there. So when we're in an indoor setting, we're doing the same thing, but with a plant timer. So you're using that 18 hours a day of light, 12 hours of light during a flower stage, and you're running all these lights on a timer. Bad thing about indoor growing, while it does produce a lot tighter quality, you are at the mercy of all of your electric and energy uses. Whereas in outdoor, you put it in the ground, you fertilize it, put it in some good soil, and it'll just keep growing. And it's at nature's mercy, so it might get infected, but usually there's balances in nature, and your plant will be all right. So keys to your environment: temperature, humidity, and CO2. For temperature, different varieties are going to want different temperatures. Sativas are used to growing in, it's like Maui Wowie is from Hawaii. Imagine a plant that's meant to grow in Hawaii growing in the mountains. It's going to have a lot harder time. So you want to make sure the strain that you're growing matches your environment. That can be done with a thermostat. Humidity, you want to make sure that there's not too much moisture in the air, too little. The way that a cannabis plant feeds, water gets sucked up through the roots, but it's got to expel that water out of its leaves. So water is actually leaving the surface of the leaf and evaporating during the day. And that's called transpiration. and your transpiration rate is matching the humidity in the room. So if there's too much water in the air, all that moisture is going to stay in the leaf or on the surface of the leaf, and it's not going to have room to escape. If your room is too dry, lower humidity, it's going to be wanting to transpire all day, and it might not be able to keep up with its root system. CO2, it's important to have ample CO2 in your room because plants feed off of CO2. That's how they photosynthesize. We do not. So we are used to much lower levels of CO2 in our daily lives here. But when you're really trying to push plants toward their maximum efficiency, bumping up the CO2 levels in your room will allow them to photosynthesize a lot better and put more energy out. So finally, we're going to talk about fertilizers. Often when you go to the store, you'll see these 3 numbers on a bag, and those stand for nitrogen, phosphorus, and potassium, which are the 3 major nutrients that a plant needs in order to survive. Nitrogen is promoting foliar growth. So when your plant is in veg, you'll see often a lot more nitrogen in those nutrients. Phosphorus helps promote root growth, and potassium is to promote flower growth. So when you're in a vegetative cycle, you'll have a lot more nitrogen, a little more phosphorus, and when you switch over to your flower cycle, you're going to want to put more potassium, feed your plants more potassium, because that's going to help them get bigger flowers. And this is the same for dry fertilizers or liquid fertilizers. So that was the end of our presentation. I wanted to thank you all for coming. And if you have any questions, feel free to email me, HumbleFlowerFarms@gmail.com. You can follow me on Instagram at HumbleTheGrower. You can follow the farm at Humble Flower Company, and be sure to check out our website, HumbleFlowerFarms.com. If you enjoy this presentation, you got something from it, and you feel like you can share it with someone else to inform them, please do so. Like, comment, subscribe to our channel, and we look to see you soon on the next video. Thank you.